All right, a Fox News alert, big labor blaming President-elect Trump for big cuts before he even takes office. The SEIU planning to slash its budget by nearly a third in the coming year and pointing the finger at the new administration. It says when Republicans win, unions lose, but some here say that's a win for all workers. Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. I'm Kennedy, in for Neil Cavuto. To Ben Stein, Stephen Moore, and Emily Jashinsky, along with Jessica Tarlov and Joe Fame. Charles Payne, Charlie Gasparino, and Adam Lashinsky are working on their hangovers as we speak. Well done, gentlemen. All right, Steve Moore, I'm going to start with you. Unions are running scared, at least union bosses are, but it seems as though union households gave Trump quite a boost in the election. Is this split a good thing?
Well, look, I think this election outcome was very good news for many of the unions. If you're a public sector union member, probably not, because Trump wants to shrink the government. But when you talk about the old blue-collar industrial unions, those unions are going to do, that is to say the workers in those unions are going to do very well, because Donald Trump is very much committed to bringing back the jobs of coal miners and of pipe fitters and truckers and other kinds of industrial jobs that have left the country. So I think that the union leaders wanted to run in one direction, and the union members that they're supposed to represent wanted to go in the other. But I think ultimately more jobs is good for unions, and I don't know what they're crying about. All
right, the SEIU, making these massive cuts. Emily Jashinsky, I will go to you because you say this could be a great thing for all workers, getting the federal government out of their pocketbooks and out of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, President-elect Trump understands what Ronald Reagan understood, which is that the scariest words you can hear are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. The Trump administration understands that the government intervention is often more harmful than it is helpful. And look, I mean, if you're thinking about, take for instance the federal minimum wage, that's something, of course, the Trump administration is going to stop organized labor from working to implement. That's great for workers. Fewer workers will lose their jobs. There'll be more job opportunities. So I think a pro-business administration is good for workers, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and certainly more opportunities for minority workers who are getting into the workplace for the very first time. And of course, the SEIU has been behind that Fight for 15 campaign. Ben Stein, I'm going to go to you because you're a man who loves everybody to make money, and you say that if there is, in fact, mass prosperity on the horizon, that this could be an enormous boost, and perhaps we don't need no stinking public sector unions.
Well, the SEIU has for a long, long time basically been an arm of the Democratic Party, or you might say it another way, the Democratic Party for a long time has been an arm of the SEIU.
That's right.
The SEIU is it mostly or very largely works with government sector employees, as Steve was saying, and that's the only part of the union labor force that has not been shrinking. Now they're going to get clobbered, I think, if Mr. Obama is gone and Mr. Trump really does slash the size of the government. The SEIU in no sense represents the real working man. The SEIU is a group of left-wing politicians, just my opinion, who have no interest in anything but their own jobs and their own prestige and their own powerful connections in Washington. The fact that they're cutting their budget is a good thing. Anything that helps get the union's pockets, union officials' hands out of the pockets of the workers is a good thing. We don't want the unions keeping people from working. SEIU, prime example, anti-worker, pro-bureaucrat.
Yeah, absolutely right. And their president, Mary Kay Henry, has had some feisty words saying, because the far right will control all three branches of the federal government, we will face serious threats to the ability of working people to join together in unions. Jessica, I think you can maintain that they were having problems before this election. A 30% budget slash in a single year, that's pretty outrageous. Could they realistically blame it all on Trump? Do you think that this union would go untouched if there were a Hillary incoming administration?
No, I don't think so. We've been talking for months about the fact that public sector unions in this country do need to reform. Now, I don't want them gone. I think that, what Ben Stein was talking about, though I respect him a great deal, it's going too far. Public sector unions will be a feature of the American economy till the end of time. But they do need to reform, and we have seen a divergence between what the leadership is saying and what those people on the ground are saying. Yeah. Now, a lot of them back Trump, not a majority, obviously, but they need to have a discussion about about how best to move forward, how to represent their workers' interests.
Yeah.
To Emily's point, though, about the minimum wage, Donald Trump has said that he's not for raising the federal minimum wage, but close to 70% of Americans want that. That's not just
states
yeah,
are going to see an increase in the minimum wage in the coming year.
I think 15 is going too far when you look at what reasonable economists are saying. But we have over 600 economists saying that 10-10 is a good baseline. And then let's adjust. If you're in New York City, you can go to 12. If you're at an even bigger city, maybe Los Angeles, I don't know, 15 seems a stretch for anywhere. But those kinds of local conversations can be had. Yeah. But to just out of the gate say no minimum wage hike when 70% are saying that this is something that they need to be able to survive, you need to pay attention.
Well, well, I think what he's saying, though, I mean, just to be clear, Donald Trump didn't say no to minimum wage increases. He said, let's let states decide whether they want to raise minimum wage or cities.
Steve, I'm talking about federal minimum wage. It's a different question here.
I know, but I think that's the important point here. You know, if we raise the minimum wage to say $10 an hour, as you say, at the federal level, yeah, in San Francisco or Washington, D.C., where the economies are booming, that might work. But if you live in Mississippi and you have a $10 minimum wage, you're going to put a lot of people out of work, and that's why.
Yeah, but you also need to take into account. And listen, I am an anti-15 minimum wage gal, but you need to understand what a living wage is anywhere, even in Mississippi. Right now, it's $7.25. That's too low for anyone anywhere.
Yeah,
and I understand the argument about cutting jobs.
All right, I want to
zero is also not a livable wage. And
yes,
that's
if you turn into an iPad, it's going to be difficult.
That's absolutely right. Those are the risks you run, either cutting your workforce and automating or shutting your business completely. And that's absolutely the last thing we need. So what is the solution here, Joe Fahmy?
I mean, minimum wage, I agree, should be a state issue. Because if you are in Idaho, it could be lower. If you're in New York, it should be $80 living in the city. So I think it really depends on what city. But
can I get on that minimum wage?
Yeah.
But in general, union membership has declined over the years. And I think the reason is a lot of these are more political fundraising units than worrying about their labor workers. And they're disguised as political units rather than actual unions.
All right, so what do you chalk up that disconnect to between the active union members and their bosses? Bosses clearly supporting Hillary Clinton and many more union households going for Trump and his optimistic message of economic prosperity.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the SEIU, they went all in on Hillary, and they've been big backers in the past of Obama and of Affordable Health Care Act and so forth. So they kind of went all in, and it's not unlike tech CEOs where they might have been vocal against Trump, but they could backtrack a little bit and say, okay, now that you're in, we can work together. And they had a tech summit with everyone. But once you went all in and your candidate was wrong, you're basically.
They also, though, I just want to say, in defense of unions and how they have their finger on the pulse of what's going on, there were all those articles that came out after the election about how union members they knew that we were about to lose Wisconsin and Michigan, and they wanted to bust people in from Iowa, and the Democratic Party didn't pay attention to that, Hillary Clinton's campaign. So we do need these people. They are out there talking.
There again, you have this disconnect that shouldn't be fixed by a post-mortem. You should have a campaign that's able to adeptly respond to some of these major issues and not just assume that you're going to win the states that have historically made up the blue wall.
Well, just wait for 2020. A whole new look for the Democrats. I'm guaranteeing it.
That's what I want more than anything in the world, Jessica, is another presidential campaign, because this one didn't go on long enough. All right, Ben Stein, let's go to you. You say not all unions are bad, and they're getting a bad rap, some of these private sector unions. How are they going to fare in the coming year?
Well, I sure like the Screen Actors Guild. That's a great union. I like
yeah, you do. Big movie star back.
And I miss Gasparino, who always tells about how his father was in the union. I miss that very, very much. Some of the unions do a great job. They get pensions, they get health benefits. But the union bureaucrats in Washington are part of the upper class bourgeoisie in Washington. They're not really workers at all. They haven't been workers for a long time. They're in the class with lawyers and lobbyists. They're not workers. They don't really know much about how workers live. And God bless them, they have to earn a living too. But the idea that they are joined at the hip with workers is a joke.
Yeah, no, again, we're seeing the disconnect. And you hear Democrats talking about the elitism that crept into the party. And even union bosses, you know, they were no match for the extraordinary outcome of this election.
Well paid, too.
Yeah, that's a great job. What are we doing here, Ben?